With free agency just a couple of days away, I'm going to break down 5 free agent targets that I think the Toronto Raptors should go after, along with a few other honorable mentions during this year's free agency period. Now, this isn't going to be the top 5 available free agents by any means. It's going to be 5 guys that could potentially be gettable for the Toronto Raptors, and I think would fit the team and be smart acquisitions this offseason. So, without further ado, let's dive straight into it. Hello everybody, Ben Rogers here, the Raptors Digest, breaking down my list of free agents that I want to see the Toronto Raptors target during this year's free agency. And the first guy we're talking about is Ricky Rubio. Now, this might be a head scratcher to some NBA fans saying, Ben, why do you want to go after a guard that doesn't have a reputation as, an uber athlete or anything like that, and as well as coming off of a serious ACL injury? Why on earth would you want this guy? Well, I'll tell you why. Because this guy was having a career season with the Cleveland Cavaliers prior to going down with injury. He had a significant impact on winning, and the Toronto Raptors need someone that can reliably come in and play backup point guard position minutes. We saw it in this year's playoffs when Fred VanVleet went down. Other than slotting Scotty Barnes in there to play that point guard position, some people want to see that, some people don't. But when Freddie VanVleet went out, we didn't really have anyone reliable there on the bench to fill those shoes. Now, obviously, there are high expectations for Malachi Flynn to potentially come back this season and have a breakout year. I'm very intrigued about Delano Banton as a prospect. Maybe he's still a year away, but if he can come in, then this will be solid. But I want the Raptors to win now. I want us to have a win now season, and bringing in Ricky Rubio for, even if he misses the starting half of the year, having him as a veteran that can calm down the action, calm down, command, control all the young guys on this Toronto Raptors team, that will be such a huge asset. And he puts up solid stats there as a veteran point guard coming off the bench, right? Averaged 13 points per game there last season, 4 rebounds, 7 assists, and got a steal and a half per game, shot 34% from the three-point line. Obviously isn't known over his career as a tremendous three-point shooter, but knocked them down when he needed to for the Cavs last season and came off the bench. He's willing to play that role, and I think we can get him for that mid-level, just considering the fact he was injured during midway through last season, so there might be question marks from other teams. So if I'm the Toronto Raptors, I'm trying to take a flyer on Ricky Rubio because he'd be a perfect fit for him coming in. Maybe maybe that takes back some Malachi Flynn, and Eric Flynn's going to be roasting me for saying this take on a Facebook group or something, but I really want Ricky Rubio. That's one of the free agents that I'm very encouraged. And I think whoever ends up signing him is going to be a steal. Now, if he gets paid big time, then I don't know if that's the case, but considering his injuries, I think he might be gettable. Now, the next player we're going to dive into is a three-point sniper in Gary Harris. Played for the Orlando Magic this most recent season. Obviously had a lot of potential when he was on the Denver Nuggets, and then just didn't live up to the hype that a lot of Denver Nuggets fans wanted him to live up to, but still carved out. I mean, got traded to the Orlando Magic in that Aaron Gordon deal, and then no one's really heard about him that much since, considering the fact the Orlando Magic have sort of been tanking over recent seasons and all that sort of stuff. But Gary Harris is another guy that can fulfill those backup, two-guard minutes and have a serious impact on this team, right? You look at his stats, had an average 11 points per game last season for the Mavericks, 2 rebounds, 2 assists, nothing crazy, 1 steal outside of the scoring numbers, but the intriguing number on this sort of box score is the 38% from the three-point line. Now, the Toronto Raptors, they struggle. Probably the greatest area they struggled on the offensive end this season is having consistent shooters come in and knock down shots. Obviously, guys like Svi Mykhailiuk were supposed to be that guy for the Toronto Raptors this previous season, right? There are some high expectations for Champagne Coffee from some fans, right? Wanting to see a backup wing shooter coming in. Ron Harper Jr. has some potential in that area, right? Armani Brooks we brought in. Obviously, Fred and Gary Trent Jr. are 2 really only main shooters there in the starting unit there at the 1 and 2 position. But the Raptors need someone reliable that can knock down shots. And if there's one thing Gary Harris can do, he can come into the game, play solid defense as well, right? He is no slouch on the defensive end, despite being a little bit undersized compared to the traditional Toronto Raptors player at this point. But he's a guy, plays defense, and can knock down shots. And you know what? That's all we need to have from a backup shooting guard to just take some of the relief off of a Gary Trent, off of a Fred VanVleet, off of a Scotty Barnes potentially playing those league guard positions, because we need shooting, we need defense, and Nick Nurse isn't going to play if you're not doing two of those things. So I think Gary Harris could be a solid rotation piece for this Toronto Raptors team if we could acquire him in free agency. I don't think he'd be that expensive, given the fact he didn't set the world on fire for the Orlando Magic by any means. But the next guy we're diving into, is Lonnie Walker, who might be one of the more unrealistic guys to get, given he's an restricted free agent for the San Antonio Spurs. However, the Spurs are sort of doing some weird stuff right now. It seems like they're trying to get a teardown going. I broke down DeJounte Murray's situation in our previous video, or the video before the previous one. So they might be willing to let their guys go. Lonnie Walker's still only 23, so maybe they still see some potential in him there. But this is a guy that I know had some high expectations, had a cool look with the hair when he came into the league, and then obviously like the Orlando Magic, the Spurs fell into sort of an irrelevancy. And it doesn't seem like he's been talked about a bunch over the course from most of the NBA, for most people following the league. But you look at his stats. He is a legitimate player in the league at only 23 years old. 12 points per game, 2 rebounds, 2 assists, a solid defender once again, 40% from the field. But unlike Gary Harris, cannot knock down the three-point shot just yet. 31%. So he's not horrific by any means, but not a knockdown three-point shooter just yet. However, this guy's intangibles as a scorer, explosiveness, the ability to drive the lane, get to the rim, score on people with floaters, like weird finishes, unorthodox finishes around the rim. It's pretty solid, and that's a legitimate NBA skill, being a slasher. And the Toronto Raptors are notorious for bringing these, whether through the draft or whether through free agency, bringing fringe guys in early that don't necessarily have the jump shot just yet, but have the athleticism, have the finishing ability, have those sort of skills that can be built off of, right? Can be developed and can be brought in. And I think if we brought in Lonnie Walker to the Raptors, let him develop with our squad, get some run, he can still provide some solid scoring impact off the bench. Let him develop that jump shot, and then you got a legitimate NBA, it's probably, I don't know if you call him star, but legitimate NBA starting caliber player if you get Lonnie Walker consistent jump shot through our development system. Only 23 years old as well, so still lots of room for growth for this guy coming in. So he's a guy I'd like to target. If we can steal him away from the Spurs, you'd love to see it. But the next guy we're diving into is Gary Payton II. Now, unrestricted, but he might legitimately be he's a very hard player to predict, because just last year, literally this offseason, he was in the Golden State Warriors management office asking for a job as a video choreographer. He played for the Raptors 905. He bounced around G League organizations, couldn't crack the roster spots on a lot of NBA teams, and looked like his future might not be there. He's not a young player by any means, so who knew? But then, obviously, he had one surefire NBA skill as an elite lockdown defender. That got him on the court with the Golden State Warriors, and then he became a rotation piece. Semi-starter, started some games on a championship winner, not contender, winner, and played a pretty solid playoff series, even dealing with an injury there with the elbow injury he suffered from Dillon Brooks. But in the finals, played some solid defense on the guys like Jason Tatum, Marcus Smart, Jaylen Brown, all these guys. So his value is, I don't know what money he's going to get, honestly, in this year's free agency, if there's recency bias, because given the fact he didn't have that high of expectations, coming into last season. But looking at the numbers, 7 points per game, 3 rebounds, not setting the world on fire like a few of these guys, but obviously that tremendous playoff run gets people paid, as we know with players in Raptors history, like Bismack Biyombo and these types of guys, but shot 36% from the three-point line and is arguably the best on-ball guard defender in the NBA. Him, Drew Holiday, they're all up there. It's tough. That's a tough guy to turn down. He fit in seamlessly with this Toronto Raptors team, be the perfect guy off the bench. And if we could get him at our mid-level, if we can get him, on that type of contract, I don't know if he'll be there at that position, but that's a player. But we have the links to him with the 905 as well. He'd be a guy I would love to see in a Toronto Raptors uniform come next season. Now, I got a few honorable mentions before we get into the last guy that I want to talk about, but a few names thrown around. One of them is Tyus Jones, played for the Memphis Grizzlies this year, age 26. elite backup point guard. If we can bring him in on a cheap contract, he'd be right on my list. However, he desires a starting position this year in free agency and certainly has earned it with the level of play he provided for the Memphis Grizzlies, having a ridiculous record with Ja Morant out. If we can get him to be willing to be a backup on this Raptors team, I'd love to see that, but I don't think it's going to happen. That's why he's an honorable mention. Nick Claxton's also a guy that the Toronto Raptors have been interested in year after year. A guy that feels like he's been in the NBA for a longer time than he has, but he's only 23 years old. Not much of a jump shooter, but long, wiry defender that if we do lose Chris Boucher, I'd be more inclined. I'd put him on the list here, but I also am prefacing I want Thaddeus Young and Boucher back, regardless of if any of these guys are signed. I probably should have started the video with all that, but yeah, that's that. But if we do lose one of those two guys, even though it looks like we're keeping Thaddeus Young for sure, Nick Claxton would be a nice replacement there. But another guy, Mo Bamba, touched on him in thousands of videos this year. 24 years old, unrestricted free agency agent at this point. I'm less excited about him now that we have Koloko, but still, you can't have that. You can't have too many long, athletic, wiry guys in a Toronto Raptors development system, so he'd be a cool fit. And Amir Coffey on the LA Clippers has had some big games for LA last season. 25 years old, solid defender, played well for those Clippers teams, underrated guy, kind of gets overlooked throughout the league. He's a guy I could really see the Toronto Raptors getting. Am I going to be elated if we do end up signing him on a mid-level or something like that? Not crazily, but if I had to predict a guy that I could see the Toronto Raptors acquiring, especially the fact that the Clippers look like they're trying to bring in a few different players. They just extended Covington, brought in John Wall. They're trying to give money to Hartenstein. He's a guy I could see leaving the Clippers and coming to an organization like the Toronto Raptors. So those are the honorable mentions. The last guy that I'm sort of breakdown I'm excited about might be a little bit controversial because he hasn't played in 2 years, but TJ Warren. Now, the last time we saw TJ Warren, there were arguments he could be the MVP of the NBA bubble. However, for the past 2 seasons, he's been dealing with significant lower extremity injuries, ankles, knees, everything that's going on. He's only played 4 games since the NBA bubble, so we really haven't seen much of him at all. However, if you look at the stats from his most recent healthy season in 2020, 20 points per game, 4 rebounds, 2 assists. He was going head-to-head with the likes of Jimmy Butler, all these guys. Got 1.2 steals, shot 40% from the three-point line. He was looking like an absolute bucket for those Indiana Pacers squads. And given the fact he hasn't played for a while, you could probably get him on a decent contract, given the fact he's unrestricted free agent and all that sort of stuff. I'm taking a flyer on this guy, left, right, and center. We need scoring power. We need more shooting. That's what the Raptors are sort of missing at this point right now, coming off the bench, firepower in that sort of sense. Boucher can do it maybe not night in, night out, but Boucher has that level of capability. Thaddeus Young is more of a facilitator. You look at Flynn, you look at Banton. Those guys right now, they're more set the table for other guys. They're different players themselves, but having just an absolute automatic bucket coming off your bench would be huge, a huge asset to this Toronto Raptors team. And TJ Warren, just given the injury situation he's had, he might be gettable at that sort of mid-level range, a team taking a flyer on him. And if we could bring him in and he can be 3/4 of the player he was in 2020, that's a huge addition to the Raptors, who have high playoff hopes next season. So TJ Warren's my guy. Ricky Rubio, I mentioned a few guys. You've heard me rambling on all these players, but let me know what free agents I may have missed, what free agents you're interested in the Raptors in getting at. Let me know in the comment section below. You guys are the best for making this far. Check out the Instagram, the TikTok, the Twitter, all that cool stuff. Anyways, enough of me rambling. I'm signing off. Cheers.